Hi, my name is Katie Moore, and I work in international educational development. And what this means is that I work with governments to expand access to preschool around the world. I work with humanitarian actors on how to mainstream gender or the needs of girls and boys in the response in humanitarian crisis settings, such as in a conflict zone or when there's a natural disaster. And I work with governments on how to make sure that they're prepared for crises around the world. So I got to this career path by learning from the women around me. My mom always emphasized the need to volunteer in the community, and so from a young age, I started volunteering by going to visit elderly people that didn't have any family members still alive and talking with them, asking them questions, bringing them groceries, and learning about their life story. And that was how I entered into volunteering. Then when I was a little bit older, I met my friend's aunt, and she had been a volunteer in the United States Peace Corps. So in the Peace Corps, she went to the Comoros Islands, which is on the coast of Eastern Southern Africa. And there she lived in a remote village where she was a teacher for young children and primary age children. And she didn't have access to email, running water, the internet, and she could only speak with her family by phone about once a month or through letters every 6 months. And she spoke of her volunteer opportunity there as one of these life-changing events where she learned so much from the people she was serving, and she also received so much more in return from having the chance to live and work amongst the people in the Comoros Islands. So from learning about her volunteer experience, I also was inspired to become a Peace Corps volunteer. So as a teenager, I had this in my mind that I really wanted to be a Peace Corps volunteer and wanted to do anything it took after college to go into the United States Peace Corps. So I ended up going into university to study early childhood education because I also had a mentor in high school that gave an assignment to make an activity about climate change. And I made a board game for young children. So she planted the seed in my mind that I should be a teacher. And from there, I realized I really liked children. I loved education, and school for me was a safe place. And I loved being in school. So I decided that in the end, I would study education, and maybe that was the way that I could serve later on as a Peace Corps volunteer. And so after college, I joined the Peace Corps, and I went to Mozambique, which is in Eastern Southern Africa. And as a Peace Corps volunteer, my role was to work with young adults that also wanted to be teachers and provide them with their teacher education preparation. Mozambique had had a civil war, and many teachers unfortunately perished during the war. And so the Mozambican government wanted to work with the United States government to expand their teaching workforce, meaning they wanted to train more teachers that could go and serve in the schools in remote areas of the country. And so the United States government came up with an arrangement with the Mozambican government through the Peace Corps to train volunteers like myself to work with their teacher professional development institutes to then work with teachers. And so that was my role as a Peace Corps volunteer, and I worked with students between the ages of 18 and 30 years old that were learning how to be teachers. And then after they participated in the training course at the school where I worked, they would go to remote areas and be primary school teachers in many cases. So after the Peace Corps, I fell in love with this idea of working with other governments to help them expand and strengthen their education systems. And instead of doing this as a volunteer role, I wanted to understand how could I do this as a career. So again, I spoke with many mentors or people that I knew that worked in this field to understand what were the steps that I needed to take if I wanted to turn this volunteer opportunity into something that I could do as a lifelong career. So many people suggested that I get a master's degree and then get more experience working in other countries. So I followed that advice, and I received a master's degree in international educational development. And then I also gained more experiences through fellowship opportunities working overseas. And some of the things that I explored with my initial stage of my career were things like helping governments expand access to mine risk education in countries such as the Lao PDR, where people were affected by unexploded ordnance, or the landmines that were left after the Vietnam War. I also explored things during this time, such as how to support teachers implement inclusive education for children with disabilities or other special needs. And then I also went to countries such as Timor-Leste to work with the government to see how children that did not have access to preschool could participate in models such as community-based preschools, or preschools in their homes or churches or other areas in their community where there were no formal government preschools, to have access to quality preschool so they could be prepared for elementary school and moving onwards, and how to expand this model. So these were some of the initial jobs that I had to learn how to work with countries, work with governments, and provide options for education. The thing that I love about this work and what I've loved for these years is coming up with solutions to really challenging problems, like how to ensure that all children in a country have preschool access where only 10% of the young children have such access to preschool, or how to work with communities that do not have any schools where they want to start providing some learning opportunities for young children, and working with volunteers in their own communities to train mothers, older siblings, grandparents, how to provide stimulation or how to provide these activities for children in their communities. So this idea of problem solving has been something that I've really loved about my career, because it gives the opportunity to do that with a variety of people in a variety of places. I think the most challenging thing about my career is how to work with different governments and understanding what are the trade-offs of making one decision over another decision. So if a government is investing money in expanding access to preschool, should they invest in teacher training? Should they invest in infrastructure? Where could they make the most impact? And make this impact at scale, meaning how can they reach the most people with what they want to do with the money that they have. So this has been really challenging, but thankfully there are a lot of amazing people that I've worked with over the years that have had experience in how to understand more about the economics of education and how to use this kind of research or evidence to support governments make the decisions that are best for their country. Volunteer as much and often as you can. By volunteering, you'll understand what your likes and dislikes are, what your passions are, and how you can turn your volunteer work into a potential career. Whether or not it's in the international education field or another field, volunteering is a great way to get experience and to learn if your passion is something that translates into a career path.